All right, it's a nice treat here, joined by the Executive VP, CEO, and Director of Player Personnel for the Dallas Cowboys, who are trying to bounce back, coming off a rough season with the injuries a year ago. Stephen Jones is with us here on Tiki and Tierney. Stephen, how you feeling today, man? What's happening?
Well, we're having a great, beautiful day out here in Southern California. It couldn't be any better, and glad we're beating the heat there away from Dallas.
Yeah.
I think it's 100-plus there today.
You know, Stephen, I always wondered that. I was playing, and we'd go up to Albany, New York for our training camp, and I'm like, man, this stinks. We're in a dorm at a SUNY college, and the Cowboys are going out to California to practice. What started that training camp trip out to California? I know the Saints do it now as well. They go up to Greenbrier in West Virginia, but getting away from home, what's the benefit?
Well, I think Tex, you give Tex a lot of credit for it. For 27 years, he brought the Cowboys out to Thousand Oaks. And believe it or not, I do believe Tex is one of the great branding men to ever step foot in this league. He just never monetized it, but he worked hard to get the Cowboys in the NFC East in that big media market, and then wanted to bring his team out here to California and touch all the Cowboy fans that might be out here. And at the same time, we look at it as a place, because we have trained when we got the team back in '89, Jerry wanted to bring it back to Texas and let the media people and the fans back there be a part of camp. So we went to Austin and Wichita Falls, and we found out real quick you get in survival mode in a hurry rather than getting better. And these players come out here, it gives them a little respite. We're only out here for about 2.5, 3 weeks now, and it lets them get away from their families, 100% focus on the team. And then at the same time, because it is such nice weather, you're actually into improving yourself, getting better rather than just trying to get through each practice and survive because of the heat.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Stephen, getting away. You know, last season, let's start here, got away kind of quick as soon as Tony went down. You guys were on the cusp of jumping out to a 2-0 start and really meeting the expectations most of us had for you. And then, you know what, Tony's done. You look up, it's 2-7. It's really uphill the rest of the way. I mean, it must have been incredibly helpless to just watch a few players not be able to even remotely fill the void for Tony, and an otherwise pretty good roster not do much.
Well, I think we just organizationally failed. Not only the players, but more than that, our coaches, our management, Jerry and myself, did not show the right leadership there. I mean, I think Jerry's message right off the bat, going forward, we got to focus on who's going to play in the game, not who's injured, not who's suspended, not who's around, and then design game plans, design ways to win a football game to those skills and those talents. And we just 100% failed in that area. I know Jason's been the first to raise his hand with his staff. I know Jerry and I raised our hand in terms of the leadership we should have provided. And we were too worried about when Tony might come back, when Dez is going to finally work his way into form, when we're going to get this player back. Boy, it would have been nice to have Dunbar. We can't have those type of distractions. We got to focus on who's here, who's on the field, who's playing the game, and go from there. We've won games in the past without Troy Aikman and gone on to the playoffs. We've won games without Tony. We had Kitna, and he had a great run, got us in the playoffs, and then Tony came back. We just didn't have that mentality last year, and we've got to improve on that.
Very honest assessment. By the way, it's Stephen Jones with us here on Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio. Jerry, of course, is your dad. And I'm curious, I mean, when you're sitting around on Thanksgiving, do you say Happy Thanksgiving, Dad, or
never.
Happy Thanksgiving, Jerry? Well, what do you
He's my
say,
dad,
Steve?
and I love him, and he's wonderful. For whatever the reason, we got in early when you're referring to him, in case someone didn't know it was your father, to refer to him as Jerry. But I've never called him to his face Jerry in my life. Hey, Dad, how you doing?
Hey.
What are we doing today? That type of thing. But it's just a habit that's developed in case someone doesn't quite have that relationship, and it's just kind of stuck with me. But no, I don't ever call him Jerry.
Yeah, no, you're down in the South. That might be met with some harsh repercussions, fatherly repercussions.
I might get my butt whipped.
Exactly. Stephen, tell me how you evaluate Jason Garrett. Like, he's a really good friend of mine. He was here when we went to the Super Bowl and he helped carry Collins immeasurably. He lived in the city when I lived in the city, because there weren't a lot of us that lived in the city, and I got to know him really well and expected great things when he finally rose to the helm as a head coach. How would you evaluate him, and how will you evaluate him going forward?
Yeah. First of all, I think Jason's one of the up-and-coming coaches in this league. We're fortunate to have him. As you know, we just extended him. I do think, even though Jason grew up talking football from the time he could walk, his dad was a great football coach, obviously coached for the Cowboys, scouted for the Cowboys. All Jason's ever known is football, so he is a football man through and through. At the same time, when you become a head coach, you still have a lot to learn. And I think obviously Jason went through some growing pains. If you look at some of the great coaches in this league, I mean, Belichick's first stop was not necessarily what we think of when you think of Bill Belichick. So as Jason went through the process and we saw all the positive things, he's obviously incredibly bright. He's a great orator, great messaging with the team. He relates to the players. He was one of the guys that Troy counted on, nicknamed Red Ball here with the Cowboys, and got along with everybody. He has all the skill sets. It's just a matter of getting seasoned, and I think he's at that point. Obviously, a tough learning experience last year, but I do think he's really turning into a great football coach. He started off calling the plays. I think he's even now at a comfort level where it's probably the better thing to do for him to be the leader, manage the game, and have play callers on either side of the ball. I just think he's come so far, and I think it's all in front of him, and he's only going to get better.
Steve, one of the cliches in sports is the team that wanted it most was the team that ultimately win, and I don't always believe that. But if there is a team that it just feel, and I'm from afar here, that just feel like really, really wants to get to and win a Super Bowl, because it's been a while since you guys were in the NFC Championship game and ultimately the Super Bowl, which is the last one you won in 1995. What's the urgency there for you guys to get there?
I totally agree with you, by the way, and I've got a good story. Jerry and Tony were sitting around one night, and we were talking about our team. I was sitting over across the way there with Jason, and we were visiting about our team. And Tony looked over and pointed at Jason and I, and he said, "Look, Jerry, you and I don't have much time left. We got to get a Super Bowl, and these two guys are going to be around a while." And of course, Jerry looked at him kind of funny and said, "Well, I know why you're not going to be around a while, but what does that mean for me?" Are you thinking I'm at the end of it? But in all seriousness, there is a real urgency. Obviously, you're talking about a guy like Coach Garrett. Every day is urgent to him. He's the hardest worker in the building. And then you go to Tony, who's I think, obviously in the prime of his career, but he doesn't have forever when you go past that 35-year mark. And then, of course, Jerry is so intense, and it obviously bleeds down to myself and the rest of the organization in terms of the urgency that we have right now. So I think you've got it nailed. There's never been urgency like there is right now in terms of our football team, and we really feel great that we put a really solid football team together. Are we strong in every area? No, we're not. We understand our pass rush needs some help, but we've got a great coach there that I think will get the most out of our players. But we also have some areas where I think we're one of the strongest teams in the league in terms of where we put together some personnel. So we feel good about this team. We think it's if things fall right, we can certainly challenge for a Super Bowl, and obviously that's our end goal.
We're talking to Stephen Jones with us here on Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio. Dallas Cowboys, of course, part of our Tiki and Tierney two-a-days, and Stephen, the executive VP and the CEO and director of player personnel. You use the word urgency, and I think it certainly fits, because I think Tiki's point, which you obviously concurred with, I was thinking the same thing. It just seems, while everybody wants to win, that Dallas is one of the few teams that are like, you wake up and that's every thought that consumes you, which leads me to this question here, Stephen. For some team that wants to win as badly as you do, the neglect for the backup quarterback position is so confounding to me. Why don't you have a better backup?
Well, everybody has an opinion, and Scott has been around Kellen Moore a lot and felt so good about his situation there. And, I know there's other veteran quarterbacks that maybe more than half or three-quarters of the league would say, hey, these players are better than Kellen. But Scott had a great feel for him. We had a great feel for him after being around him, and I really felt he was the right guy for the job for us. Unfortunately, he's hurt and going to be out for an extended period of time. And right now we're certainly looking in terms of that really seasoned veteran backup quarterback. But in the meantime, I know it's hard to get your hands around, but we have a great feel for Dak Prescott. He has really come in here and shown some very unique leadership skills, has the quote-unquote it factor, and he's getting reps that normally young guys would never see. Obviously, we're managing Tony. With Kellen not in there, he's getting a lot of reps with the ones. It'll certainly happen against the Rams here this weekend in terms of his repetitions. And then Jamel Showers, the number who started out as the 4, will get a lot of reps as well, and we certainly like him. But, I point to what they did with the Bengals up there with A.J. McCarron, and a young guy who came in and got the reps, and they went with him and was able, when Andy Dalton went down, was able to win a couple of games to keep him there with home field advantage. I think he won 2 or 3 out of the 4 that he played in, and then should have won a playoff game. So we're big in, with Tony where he is right now, we're big into developing a young quarterback.
Stephen, we wouldn't be doing our job if I didn't ask one of these negative questions. Is persisting down in Dallas, and it's around your defense and some of these guys who have gotten into trouble. DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory, Rolando McClain. What went wrong there? Are you guys? What did you miss on with all those guys?
Well, I think at the end of the day, and I think we've been known for this, is we're willing to take risks as an organization. I know when we came in the league in the early 90s there, Charles Haley was with a great organization, the 49ers, who had won 4 Super Bowls, and they didn't want him around. And we took a risk that we felt like we needed a pass rusher, and that was what was missing when we had the triplets there. And put him around some great leadership and a great team, and he came in here, and we won 3 Super Bowls. And then you've had some guys who are always on the edge, and I'm sure he's friends with you guys. Michael Irvin, he'll be the first to tell you he had some close calls, and we were able to have a lot of success with Michael. The same goes for Des Bryant. We've taken guys, Sean Lee, who's an injury risk. Obviously, we did it again here with Jalen Smith this year. When you take some risks, you're going to have some things that bite you. And I think last year, if you take the disappointing season we had, and then you've got some guys who may get in the gray areas, then it bites a little bit harder. I would submit to you, had we not won some games there with Charles, we would have regretted that trade. But, when you're in our business, you're dealing with human beings. I wouldn't necessarily say these guys are bad guys. I mean, these guys have sicknesses. We have infrastructure in place. Sometimes it's a longer journey than you suspect, and obviously that's certainly what happened with a couple of our defenders here. And then, of course, with Greg Hardy, we just made the decision that it just wasn't going to work out here. So it's certainly fair. It's certainly a valid criticism. It's certainly one we'll continue to evaluate and see how we do a better job going forward of having more successes than we do disappointments. But we stand by our guys, and we'll continue to work with them and see if they can overcome some of these demons that they have and go on to be successful players in this league. If they don't, then obviously we'll have to move on from them.
Stephen, as you kick back and you're sitting on the porch here and you look in your own backyard, that's your team. And then, a couple of neighbors, the Redskins, the Giants, the Eagles, you eventually appear into their backyard as well. Now, we know who won the division, and we know that, on paper, literally the Redskins are the team to beat, based on what went down a year ago. How do you size up the NFC East right now? Do you see it a little more wide open? How do you think the pecking order is right now?
I just it seems to be always wide open. I know the Eagles had a run there for, with Coach Reed and when Donovan was firing on all cylinders, but usually, as you well know, Tiki, in the NFC East, anybody can beat anybody.
You're right.
And, you're talking about organizations that have a lot of resources. They usually have great coaching staffs, great scouting staffs. They've done their homework. They've got, franchise-type players on every team. And, that's what makes the East so great. At the same time, we all know that this game is about quarterbacks. And, when I size it up, obviously the Redskins have a young up-and-comer in Cousins who is doing a lot of good things. You have a guy who's won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants and Eli. And then you've got a little more unsettled situation there in Philly. And then, of course, when our guy's healthy, we feel like he's the best player in this division. And I think when he has had healthy, successful seasons, we've been able to win the East. And we certainly feel like with our offensive line, we made a very strategic pick in Zeke Elliott, who we think will not only help control the football and protect Tony in terms of the pressure on him, but will also protect our defense if we can control the ball. And we just feel like we've got as good a chance as anybody to win this very competitive division.
Yeah, Steve, I got to ask you this question also. Johnny Manziel, every time he comes up, it's Dallas Cowboys. Is there a chance? You're telling me there's a chance or no chance?
No, there's no chance. Obviously, Johnny needs to get his hands around his life. He needs to do the things that make him a good person off the field, I think, before he can ever have any chance of being successful in our league. He's a guy, obviously, from Texas that we've all followed and had an amazing career there at A&M. And unfortunately, he has some things that are holding him back, not only as a football player, but as a person in life. And we certainly hope he gets his hands around that because, he's obviously a guy who's had some very unique successes in his life. And when he is able to have his hands around some of his issues that he has off the field, then he usually translate into a success for him on the field. But hope he is able to get his hands around his life, and at some point, if he does, I'm sure he'll get another chance.
Yeah,
but at the moment, I don't think it certainly won't be in Dallas.
Yeah, I agree. Amen to that. Look, Steve, I've never talked to you before. This is a treat. It's a pleasure. It almost makes me want to like the Dallas Cowboys, being a Giant.
Easy, buddy. Take it easy.
But you're honest, man. You're honest, and you tell it like it is, and I respect that.
Yep.
Well, y'all are great to be on with, and look forward to a great season for the NFL coming up, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.